All right, so everybody, thank you so much for coming and joining us here this evening for our August town hall. This is Surplus Store and Recycling Center. We'll be focusing on beverage container recycling tonight. And my name is Katie Deska. I'm the education coordinator.
My name is Dave Smith. I'm the recycling coordinator.
And I'm Keen Beach. I'm the human resources coordinator.
Okay, so just to get started, for those of you who are watching on Zoom, you have a couple functions at the bottom of your screen. If you hover down there, there's a Q&A function, and that's what you'll press when you want to ask us a question during the question and answer period. And you can also adjust the view of your screen to see the slides that we're going to be showing on a bigger scale, or to see the speaker's face on a larger scale. So we'll just start with a couple, we have 3 poll questions for you. I'd just like to ask you those right now. So let me pull up the first one here. Okay.
Okay, first poll question is, what beverage container do you purchase most frequently? Is it plastic water bottles, juice bottles, milk jugs, cartons for protein drinks, glass bottles, or aluminum cans? Just click on one of those and please hit submit. And we'll give it just a minute for those answers to populate.
Okay, looks good. We'll end this poll. We've got most of our participants in.
Looks like milk jugs and cartons for protein drinks are the top 2, which is great. We recycle both of those.
Okay, so let's move on to what the next one is. We've got
So our next question is, do you use a refillable water bottle? Yes, almost all the time, no, or sometimes. Again, just click on whichever one you most best represent, and then hit submit.
Okay. Looks like we've got a lot of reusers in the crowd with us.
Excellent.
Wow.
100%, that's great.
Okay, and then we have one more question.
Do you save bottles for reuse? Yes, no, or I save a couple occasionally. Wow, interesting. I save a couple occasionally, 100%. That's great.
Okay, so we'll now pull up a quick YouTube video that we got last week, just to give you an overview of our recycling of the beverage containers and which ones we take. So let me pull this up here.
While Katie's doing that, I'll just mention, feel free either in Facebook Live or in the Q&A to put questions in as either the video or Dave's presentation is going along, and we'll have a portion at the end where we'll answer your questions for you.
Okay, and here we go.
I'm here at the MSU Surplus Store and Recycling Center, where today I want to talk a little bit about beverage container recycling and where our materials go. We process over 700,000 pounds of beverage containers every year. Beverage containers come in 4 general types. There's plastic, such as this number 1 PET plastic water bottle, and this number 2 HDPE plastic milk jug. There's also aluminum cans, glass bottles, and lastly, our carton containers, like the shelf-stable carton container and this refrigerated carton container. Plastics go to Dundee, Michigan to what's called a bottle-to-bottle recycler, where they're turned into new bottles during the processing. Our glass goes to Strategic Materials in Chicago, where they're turned into road aggregate, abrasives in the sandblasting process, and in different industrial processing. Our Our aluminum goes to Lansing, Michigan to a local processor where they combine it with the materials that they could collect and then send it out to processors in the region. And finally, our carton containers go to Sheboygan, Michigan, where they're put into a hydropulper where it separates the pulp, the fiber pulp from the plastic and then the aluminum that's in the shelf-stable cartons. The fiber products are then made into new tissue and toilet paper. So make sure that you recycle where you live, work, and play, because these materials are very important to our local resources and to our manufacturers in the region. Thank you so much for recycling here at MSU.
Well, thank you, Katie. Next up, I'll have a PowerPoint presentation to review for you, which goes a little bit more in depth into our beverage bottle recycling. And while Katie's pulling that up, I do have a couple fun facts for you. Globally, about 1 million bottles are sold every minute, and unfortunately, only 91% of them are not recycled. There are 22 million pounds of plastic that enter the Great Lakes every year, which makes it critically important that we recycle as much plastic as possible. And then of the 243 billion beverage containers sold in the United States every year, 63% or 153 billion are not recycled. So clearly we have some work to do with beverage container recycling, which is why we are here tonight to talk to you a little bit more about beverage container recycling. And we want to answer some key questions. What types of beverage containers do we accept at MSU? How are they recycled? Where do we send your recyclables and what are they made into? And what contaminants are most often associated with these containers? The types of containers that we accept include plastic bottles and jugs, glass bottles and jars, aluminum cans, and carton containers. They are recycled at MSU from campus buildings and from our drop-off center. They're tipped at our material recovery facility, sorted to separate the different types of materials, and then the contaminants are removed. They're baled, weighed, and loaded onto semi-trailers, and then sold to recycled materials processors and manufacturers. I have a few photos for you here to show the process. This is the photo on the left-hand side of the screen is one of our containers at our recycling drop-off center where you can deposit materials. This one is for cardboard. And then the other picture on the right is one of our recycling stations in the buildings on campus. The next thing we do is we take that material, we pick it up, and we take it to our material recovery facility where it's tipped or dumped onto the floor of the MRF. In this case, it's a bunch of cardboard boxes. Then the material is sorted by material. The contaminants are removed, and the materials are sorted. The materials are sorted at the sorting facility on our sort line. Next, the materials are baled and weighed. You can see the materials in one of our bunkers here. That's plastic PET water bottles on the left-hand side. The photo in the middle is one of our bales of material. It is one of our number 2 HDPE plastic bales. Those bales weigh about 1,400 pounds. They're then tagged and weighed and placed on containers and shipped to one of our manufacturers. We're very proud of the fact that the vast majority of our materials are sold here in the Midwest. Over 90% stay right here in Michigan. As you can see from the graphic, the furthest location away is a paper mill in a town called Ladysmith, Wisconsin. It's about 500 miles away. And that's the furthest we send any of our materials. So it all stays here in the Midwest. Our plastic bottles and jugs are sent to Dundee, Michigan to a bottle-to-bottle recycler. They're made into new PET plastic bottles and HDPE plastic bottles. So bottle-to-bottle recycling means that just what it sounds like. We take an old bottle and turn it into a new one. The recycling process starts with something called flaking. Those plastic bottles are cut into small pieces called flakes. They're then run across a conveyor line that uses optical sorting and air jets to sort the different colors of the PET material. They then go to a machine that washes it to remove contaminants. The plastic flakes are then heated and placed into an extruder. That extruder further removes any contaminants and melts the plastic to a spaghetti-like string. And then those spaghetti-like strings are actually cut into small pieces called pellets. Those pellets are all of a like color and material. They're used to be melted into what's called a preform. You can see on the far left there. It's the start of a new bottle. It's got the thread and deck on it. That preform is then molded into a new bottle that completes the recycling loop. Our glass bottles and jars are sent to Chicago, Illinois. They are made into various products such as fiberglass, highway bead, abrasives for things like sandblasting, specialty glass like landscape rock, fire pit glass, aquarium chips, and also as a paint filler. The glass bottle and jar recycling process starts by breaking the glass into small pieces called cullet. Then a trommel is used to remove paper, metal, and cork. The trommel is a large spinning drum that separates the material. The cullet is then heated to burn off any of the sugars, the bacteria, and the glue that might be remaining on the bottle. The cullet is then screened to size, classified into different sizes, and then sold to manufacturers to be remade into new products. Our aluminum is sent to Lansing, Michigan, to a local scrap metal processor. That material is eventually made into bicycles, airplane parts, new cans, cookware, and much more. Aluminum is very recyclable and is made into lots of different things. The recycling process for aluminum involves about 6 steps. We collect those cans along with tin cans as well and send it to that local scrap metal processor. They sort it into ferrous, which means containing iron and non-ferrous metals, by the use of magnets and eddy currents. It is then sold to mills and foundries in the region. Those foundries melt the aluminum and cast it into ingots. An ingot is a long kind of rectangular bar. That bar is then slowly heated up and it's flattened out into sheets and wound into coils. And then it's sold to manufacturers to make into new products like the can and the graphic on the right side. And as you can see from that graphic, it takes about 60 days for a recycled aluminum can to become a new can and make its way back onto store shelves at your local grocery store. The last item that we accept is carton containers. That's a new material for us. We send that up to Sheboygan, Michigan, where it's made into 100% recycled tissue and towel products. The recycling process starts by placing those into a piece of equipment called a hydropulper, which is the pictures on the right. The bottom picture is looking down into the hydropulper. As you can see, the cartons are mixed with water and spun, and it breaks down the fibers in the cartons into 2 different components. You get the paper fibers, or what's called the pulp, and then the plastic and aluminum, small amount of plastic aluminum that's in those containers is separated out. The pulp is used to make tissue and towel products, and some manufacturers will even turn the plastic and aluminum into ceiling tiles or wallboard. There are some common contaminants that we see quite frequently with some of our beverage containers. Plastic bottles oftentimes have clamshell containers mixed in with them. Those are those containers that your blueberries and strawberries come in this time of year. We also will get yogurt cups, which are not a bottle or jug, and they're also a number 5 plastic. And then we also get plastic bags as well. In our glass, we'll get things like ceramic and Pyrex, window glass, and then the caps to bottles. Now, the caps on glass bottles should be removed. The metal caps can be placed in with our metal recycling. Plastic caps can be placed in with the recycled plastics. One note on that is this is something new and a common question we get. Plastic caps on plastic bottles can remain on those bottles. It's actually better to leave them on the bottle than it is to separate them from the bottle. And then finally, our carton containers. Because this is a new material, people are still learning this one a little bit. And so we're getting some box board and styrofoam that's placed in with those materials. So some key takeaways. We can do better. We, excuse me, we generate about 243 billion beverage containers in the United States annually. Only 37% of those are recycled. Beverage containers recycling at MSU is convenient and easy. We accept plastic, metal, glass, and carton containers at both our drop-off center and all of our buildings on campus. And please know that your recyclables are important resources for local manufacturers. Over 90% of those materials remain here in the state of Michigan. They're made into new products such as toilet paper, bicycles, bottles, and much more. And recycling benefits more than just the environment. There are over 2,000 establishments in the recycling and reuse industry in the state of Michigan. They generate over $11.6 billion in receipts annually and have a payroll of about $2 billion. So there are more, as I said, more benefits than just recycling for the environment, also economic driver here in the state of Michigan. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. We do have time for some Q&A, some question and answers at the end here. If you'd like to ask questions, please click on the the Q&A feature at the bottom to submit a question. And then you can type in your question in the box and click send. Keen, do we have any questions yet?
We do have a few in, Dave. And again, feel free either on Facebook Live or in the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom panel to put your questions in. We do have a couple though. First, Sam asks, why can't Pyrex be recycled?
Well, Pyrex is a different type of material than glass. It has a different melting temperature. So oftentimes when you get materials that have different melting temperatures and you try to recycle them together, you get an end product that has a different melting temperature than either of those two products, making it very difficult to recycle.
Okay. And Rich asks on Zoom here, does the amount you get paid for the recyclables cover the cost of processing and transporting the materials?
So that's a good question. We receive revenue for recycled materials annually from the sale of each of those different kinds of materials. In particular, our plastic bottles and jugs. Glass is a material that is pretty much a break even for us. There are transportation costs associated with glass that kind of offset the revenue that we might receive from the product. Cartons are a valuable material for us. And then aluminum is also a material that's valuable as well.
Okay. Thanks for your question, Rich. We have another one here from Riley. How much has the operations recycling capacity or volume dropped with COVID-19? Good question.
Obviously we've had to make a lot of adjustments since March when, the state went under the stay-at-home order. We discontinued many of the recycling opportunities on campus, as well as there was few people that were in the buildings on campus. So we saw our recycling rates drop pretty significantly. We reopened the drop-off center on June 22nd, and we've seen pretty robust recycling since then. Even with the limited hours, we were receiving pretty close to the same amount of material we were getting on a weekly basis prior to the stay-at-home order. So even in the 8 hours or so that we were open versus the 24 hours previously, we were getting about as much material during that time. So,
okay. We have another one here from Sheila. What happens to the plastic caps that we leave on the cartons? If they don't get recycled, how can we make sure they do? Thank you.
So the plastic caps do get recycled. As I was talking about that recycling process earlier, when they flake like the PET water bottle. Oftentimes your PET water bottle has a blue cap. That's actually made out of a different type of plastic. But when that bottle is flaked, it's cut into small pieces. Those flakes run over a conveyor belt. It's a very interesting process. There's a optical scanner up above that conveyor belt that tells a computer at precisely what moment to blow a puff of air, and it will blow that blue flake into a different collection bin. So it separates that plastic from the PET plastic, and then those two types of plastics are then sorted, and then they can be recycled separately and made into new materials.
Okay, thanks, Dave, and thank you, Sheila. Another one here from Rich. For the paper products made from the cartons, is there a certain brand that we would look for if we wanted to buy products made from the cartons?
Yeah, the processor or the manufacturer up in Sheboygan, the majority of the toilet paper and tissue products that they make are made for the away from home industry. So basically places like hotels or restaurants, those type of places where they would that toilet paper would be used there. I don't know the name brands. It's not some of the typical name brands like Charmin that you would buy in your local grocery store.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thank you again, Rich. A couple more questions that came in here. What bottle materials are recycled at the highest rate, Dave?
There's a couple different ways you can answer that question. By weight, it's going to be glass bottles because they're a much denser and heavier material. If you look at more by volume, it's probably the PET plastic, water type bottles. We recycle over 127,000 pounds of those. And if you can think of how light a plastic water bottle is these days, you can imagine the volume of that is very, very high. So probably that number one PET plastic is by volume is the most recycled material.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Another question that came in here through Zoom. Going forward, what does the future of recycling look like for Michigan, specifically the greater Lansing area with COVID-19?
Sure. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball to answer that question. Certainly the markets for recyclable materials are not great. Back a few years ago, if you've been following this, China implemented something called the Green Fence, where they regulated the amount of recyclable materials and the quality of recyclable materials coming in. That had an effect on the markets. Excuse me. So it's difficult to say. It's, every time I think I know that, I know what way the markets might be going and improvements, it seems we get thrown a curveball. I think with COVID specifically, there is a robust demand for certain materials right now, like corrugated cardboard, because so many people are switching over to ordering things from Amazon or online resources. There's been a big shift in cardboard recycling, and even though there's more cardboard being generated for that type of use, the recycling rate really hasn't gone up because businesses were quite good at recycling. Most businesses that received a lot of cardboard. So for instance, a grocery store or a Macy's department store that received a lot of goods in cardboard, most of those places had their own small little baler where they would bale that material and send it back on backhaul trucks. Nowadays, most of that, or a lot of that material is shifting over to residential use. And residents aren't as good of recyclers as many businesses are. And so, there's definitely a robust demand for certain types of recyclable material right now, like cardboard and a lot of the fiber products, the paper products.
Thank you, Dave. We do have a couple more questions that came in here. This one's from Pat. Aluminum was not mentioned in the common contaminant section of your presentation. Is there not much contamination with that material?
Thankfully, there is not. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, it contains a liquid, usually, a alcoholic beverage or a soda. Most people drink that and consume all of it. And so there isn't much left to contaminate that. Also, aluminum cans, that's all there is. It's all aluminum. So we don't have some of the mixed type of materials that we might have with some other products that often can get contaminated.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Another one that came in here from Kelly. Of the different kinds of container materials that we take, which one is the best to buy as a consumer, or rather, which one has the smallest footprint or easiest to recycle?
Sure. Another great question with a not so easy answer. Certainly, items like glass and aluminum are 100% recyclable, and they can be recycled over and over again. So, the recyclability of those products is outstanding. But they're also, they're less efficient in the shipping process, particularly if you think of glass, how heavy it is. And then there's items like the new carton containers that we're accepting. Those are much more efficient to ship because they're lighter weight. They stack better. If you typically, those cartons are square, the products fit together very closely. There's not a lot of space when you ship them. So the footprint for shipping those is less. So it kind of depends. The nice thing is we recycle all four of those different types of materials now. So it's a great opportunity to recycle those either way.
All right, and that's all the questions we have right now. If any of the viewers have any questions you want to throw in before we end up here, feel free to throw it in the question and answer section as Katie goes over her next part here, or in Facebook Live.
Yeah, so we've been talking about recycling and the importance of making sure that your bottles, reach the recycling center at the end of their life for you. But we also like to highlight the reduction and reuse aspects of our zero waste hierarchy as well. So some ways that you can cut back on even the generation of your recyclable items would be, of course, to use your refillables, which a lot of us do, and also to look for where you can refill containers with beverages that you like to buy regularly. A lot of places now with the breweries, people not going out to the bars as much, you can get your growlers refilled, or I know I like to have kombucha, then that's available on tap in certain locations. Same with the larger serving sizes. So purchasing, you know, say your orange juice or your milk by like the real large cartons that you can find, and then pouring those into smaller single serve containers, either to take with you or just already have them divvied up. And then if you like a lot of the fizzy drinks, you might want to consider getting a carbonation device, something like a Soda Stream. And then you can either flavor your water that way, or they even have syrups that can, you know, replicate certain pops. If you go through a lot of bottled water at your house, maybe you can start to think about adding a water purifier to your spigot, or, you know, even thinking about working with a partnership for Culligan, getting some of those delivered to you, or purchasing the 5-gallon water refills that you can get at some grocery stations, grocery stores, and then also maybe even doing like just a basic Brita in your refrigerator. And then lastly too, just remember that, you know, it's always best when you can make your own beverage at home and save the waste of the cup. A lot of us are doing this right now with our morning coffee and that sort of thing. So that's a really good habit to you know, keep forward as things start to move back into normalcy. Dave, I thought of a question actually. I was wondering if you could talk about, you know, with some, right now, some people might not want to take their deposits back to the grocery store. Can you talk about what are the pros and cons of doing that? Of taking
Sure.
drop off?
Yeah. So, you know, when you take your deposit bottles back to the grocery store, you know, they get separated there. The new technology that they have, if you've gone lately, the machines have continued to have better and better technology. They use the barcode on the container itself to separate it out. So you get really high and good separation. Bring those materials back to us. They certainly also get recycled. Almost all of the bottles and cans that go through the beverage container deposit system get turned back into new glass bottles and jars, and, you know, aluminum cans. Through our process, they may get used for other uses. They'll be recycled. But if you're someone who's interested in making sure those get turned into new bottles and jars or aluminum cans, you might want to take them back to the store. But certainly can recycle them with us. Unfortunately, we can't give you the 10-cent deposit, but we'll definitely recycle that material as well.
Thanks for answering that. And Keen, do you see any other questions coming in?
I don't, Katie. It looks like we've answered all the questions they have right now. So.
Okay. Well, we'd just like to thank everyone for joining us and taking some time out of their day to learn a little bit more about recycling and the process. We do have another town hall coming up next month. On Thursday, September the 10th at 7 p.m. We'll be right back here, and we'll be talking about the surplus store and some of the updates that we've made to accommodate some of the changes with COVID, and how you can kind of stay up to date on the sales for the store.
And if you do think of any questions after we're done here, feel free to put them on the Facebook page under the Facebook Live still that's streaming over there, that I believe will be up there continuously. So, and then someone will answer those in the future. So.
Yep. And as always, feel free to message us on Facebook for a quick response to just through the chat function. Okay, thank you, everybody. You have a lovely Thursday evening.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.